Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. So we've got a new parliamentary season that's just started, and we've got lots of things going on. So I thought it'd be really great to check back with the political panel I've had on the show before, Sara MacIntyre from Kelowna, BC. She's a conservative. She's been involved in Stephen Harper's office in Ottawa and Christy Clark's office in BC. She currently is with the Convenience Industry Association of Canada. She's a government relations, government affairs expert, and she's been very involved in Conservative Party politics over the years. And Marc Kealey, who runs Kealey and Associates, a government relations firm, but he's also very politically active historically within the Liberal Party. He worked in John Turner's office on Parliament Hill. So Marc was with John on Parliament Hill, and Sara was with Stephen on Parliament Hill. So it's interesting the incredible background that these two people have. And Marc's also been very involved in both municipal, provincial, and federal politics in Ontario and Canada. So the two of you, Sara and Marc, welcome to the show.
Great to be here again, Brian. Thanks. And Sara, always good to see you.
Good to see you guys too. Thanks for having me.
So Marc, maybe I could start with you. You know, last week there was a big article, a big column in the Globe Mail. This weekend, a big column in the Toronto Star, both of them saying Freudian slip, not Pierre. Justin Trudeau's days as Prime Minister of Canada are numbered, or at least they should be. What do you think?
Well, I think Canadians have spoken quite loudly over the last number of months. And I think what they're saying ostensibly is that the public is saying, we want no more Trudeau. And I don't think that's really anything but probably self-inflicted on the part of Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister and the leader of his party. The reason I say that, Brian, is that if you put yourself in a position where you become the face of your party, you become the focus of your government, and you're not sharing that face time with anyone, it's quite clear that what happens after a good number of years, we're coming up on 10 years of this government, that people have grown tired. They've grown tired of the act. They've grown tired of the decision making that's been centralized. And I think that there's no real remedy right now to look at how you replace Justin Trudeau, because the party, especially the caucus, they won't do it. They're lacking courage from that particular case, in that particular way, and the party just doesn't have that machinery in place to do that. So it's a bit of a tough go for him. I kind of feel sorry for how he must be feeling, but really, Canadians are saying no more.
The column in the paper this weekend was interesting because it used the analogy of pulling a goalie, and that you've got to pull a goalie when he's losing big time. Problem is there's no coach that can pull this goalie. Who's the person that can actually tell Justin Trudeau it's time to go? And you don't have the caucus system that can do it. You don't have a party system that can do it. And frankly, do you have anyone of the stature and the guts of a Nancy Pelosi that could do it, using the comparable of Joe Biden?
So you're using a sports analogy, and I assume you're asking me that question. So the coach really ostensibly is the leader of your party. And there's an old saying in sports that the coach has lost the dressing room. So in this particular case, nobody wants to listen to him, and they won't say anything, and they don't perform as a consequence. And so when you're, we could all look at the root cause of this, and I go back to my point, and I've said this publicly a million times. If you are labeling your party as Team Trudeau, you live and die by that. I know that Justin Trudeau in 2014, even before he was appointed Prime Minister, made the comment that if you voted Liberal, you're a member of this party. So there's really no more Liberal Party in Justin Trudeau's parlance or in his group's mentality. It's a movement, and that's a slippery slope, and that's what's happened. And a lot of Liberals think like I do. I hear Liberals a lot say, "I didn't leave the Liberal Party; the Liberal Party left me." And so these kinds of things are really percolating and have been percolating, and it's really, for all intents and purposes, too, Brian, it's got into the consciousness of Canadians. They are saying, and I hear it a lot, no more of this guy. And I think instead of doubling down and saying, I'm prepared to fight the next election, which is his right, and perhaps he should do, but to your point specifically, he should be looking at a succession plan, and he's not done that. Running a government is not dissimilar to being a board of either a publicly traded company or a very large corporation. You have to have a good succession plan, and that doesn't exist right now.
Well, I think one of the tenets of great leaders is that they can actually mentor someone, train someone, inspire someone to follow in their footsteps, take over, and create a succession plan. And the fact that there's not a logical person is potentially one of the negatives about Justin Trudeau. Sarah, I got to ask you, if something did happen with the leadership of the Liberal Party, would it actually change anything? You know, you thought maybe that Kamala Harris and the analogy of what's happened in the States could apply to Canada, but could it? Would Pierre Poilievre's position and his, 20-point lead in the polls change at all if there was a change at the top of the Liberal Party?
No, I think like the Liberal brand is mud right now. And I don't think there's anything that they can really do to change that. I mean, you're seeing it from, the Pablo Rodriguez deciding to quit cabinet and run for the Liberal leader. You're seeing the by-elections losses. The campaign manager's gone. It's just a government completely adrift. The only thing that's keeping it hanging on is the entitlement of Justin Trudeau. I mean, the country's got some very serious problems right now, and nothing is working in Ottawa. Like, absolutely nothing is getting done. All he's done is a few kind of speeches here and there. He's not even publicizing where he's going anymore. It's just, it's a function of also, time. Third termitis, I call it. It happened to Gretchen. It happened to Harper. And people are just sick and tired, and it's a change election. So I don't think it will really matter whose name is next to the Liberal logo on the ballot. People aren't going to vote for them.
It seems like the leader of the Bloc Québécois this week, who came out and said that he would not support a Conservative vote of non-confidence, thinks that the more time Canadians have to get to know Pierre Poilievre, the less they'll like him, and that therefore, extending the Liberal government a little while is actually beneficial to the Bloc, that they think that Pierre Poilievre is not earning any credit in Quebec, but also beneficial to other parties. What do you think? Is Pierre Poilievre past his prime, and so therefore the more you get to know him, the less you like him, or is the prime still to come?
I think that's hopeful thinking. I mean, it's really Conservatives that have been like outspending on ads on where Pierre is. I mean, he's everywhere. You can't turn on your phone or your computer or the TV without seeing Pierre Poilievre. So I think that that's wishful thinking. I think he's attracted a whole new constituency to the Conservative Party. He's activated youth votes that have never been attracted to the Conservative Party in the past. And look, I honestly think that the only reason Justin Trudeau is staying in power is for himself. And I think it is absolutely selfish, entitled. It borders on unpatriotic. Like, the country has some serious issues, and nothing is getting done with this government. And he has no agenda going forward. Like, at least when he came in, there was sunny ways, there was some kind of departure. There was not, a different philosophy, a different approach. There is absolutely nothing right now other than Justin Trudeau staying in office.
Okay, let me challenge you for a second in that, inflation came out last week at 2-point-something%. And if you took out housing costs, it's at 0.5%. So it seems like this just inflation that Pierre Poilievre tried to, blame on Justin Trudeau has been solved. The interest rates are down and are coming down. The carbon tax was implemented.
Monetary policy and monetary indicators aren't a sign of a successful government, Brian. We have immigration problems. We have terrorists coming into this country. We have a housing crisis. We have an addiction crisis. We have a homelessness crisis. There's a lawlessness crisis, and nothing is being addressed by this government. Everything they touch turns into an ethical scandal. You've got billions of dollars in contracts going to firms like McKinsey. You've got different ministers being called before the ethics commissioner. This government has reached its expiration date. And, you see that because even the NDP won't even want to be associated with them right now. And, Jagmeet Singh is taking a page out of Justin Trudeau's selfish playbook and staying on until he gets his pension in February. I think it's absolutely the most disgusting display of political selfishness and entitlement that we've seen in this country for the past 2 decades.
Mark,
so
is that fair?
I would no, but I think I'll offer a different perspective, and I know where it's coming from, and I can say this too. look, the question you asked was about Pierre Poilievre. And I think let's talk about that for a second. You can't expect to win an election on slogans. You can't expect to win an election without offering any solutions. You know, if there's a fire, it's Justin Trudeau's fault. If there's a flood, it's Justin Trudeau's fault. If there's a traffic jam anywhere in Canada, it's Justin Trudeau's fault. That's what we're hearing a lot from Pierre Poilievre, and it's ostensibly it's not fair. And I think, look, I like him. I think he's a good guy, but people don't know him, and what they do here and what they're grasping right now is a guy who's saying, I'm gonna glob onto your tiredness of this government. I'm going to glob onto your anger. Perhaps you're not making as much money as you think you would. But I agree with your point, Brian, and I think that's an important issue to weigh into this. Look, a government can certainly put in measures to help keep inflation down. They can certainly put in measures or stimulate the economy such that that they could have an impact on the central bank to keep inflation rates down. So and interest rates down. These kinds of things are happening already. I'm not so sure that this country is broken, like Pierre Poilievre says. I'm not so sure that there's lack of hope in this country, like Pierre Poilievre says. We've had okay government for the last 10 years on a number of fronts, but I will agree with Sarah on this. If you focus all of your attention on the leader, and the leader becomes the story, then that government lives and dies by that. And that is a challenge I'd give back to Pierre Poilievre, who's almost doing the same thing, but the color is blue.
Sarah,
yeah, I mean, I think
accusations. Sarah, apologize. Sarah made 2 accusations that terrorists are coming to Canada and that there's lawlessness in the land. Marc,
Well, look,
is that true? Is that fair?
Look, I don't think, again, you can't say that the government is saying, let's bring, people from the Taliban, or let's bring people from Hamas, or let's bring people from ISIS into Canada. That's not. We've been very clear, and the Minister of Immigration has been very clear that this was this one issue about these 2 gentlemen. I think that's what she's making reference to. It's a slip up, and you can't say that the whole government is bad because you had a slip up. But what I think you can say is that at some point, and I think this is another issue that we have to have a conversation about in this country in a bigger way, and it's not about the government, the elected officials. We have an oppressive public service, and I think the Mandarin class have really taken over by virtue of what's happened here over the last 10 years, and I think we could go down that path to have a richer discussion on how that happened. I'll just say this, and I know that Sarah worked for Prime Minister Harper, who was a great Prime Minister too, and I agree with that, but Harper used to challenge his mandarins in finance and say, I'm not going to do what you want me to do in terms of going after Canadians around issues on the economy. And this government has said, we'll take all the mandarins' advice and go after Canadians, which has really bred a lot of animosity between Canadians and their bureaucrats.
Well, when we have more people working for the CRA than we do in the armed forces, I think it's a little bit strange priorities. Sarah, 2 accusations you made that I think really are things that resonate with people in the Canadian public today are the injections and fentanyl, et cetera, and then second of all, housing crisis. What are Pierre Poilievre's solutions? Because it seems like on fentanyl injections, it's just close down the safe injection sites. It's as simple. And then on housing, it's just get rid of the gatekeepers. So are those the right solutions?
Well, I'm not here to speak about, I don't defend Pierre's positions or platforms, but what he has said on addictions is that they look very closely at the Alberta model, which is, more towards recovery as opposed to, the safety and harm and drug dens, as Pierre calls them. But there's a tide changing. We've tried the kind of safe supply, the harm reduction approach, and what has it resulted in? Well, we've got tent cities in virtually every town across this country. The only thing that that unites us as Canadians right now is that we all are experiencing and watching and seeing tent cities pop up in our towns, from East Coast to West Coast. So obviously, people are are looking at alternatives. What is the solution here? Well, it's a complicated problem. It's mental health problems. It's housing unaffordability problems. It's you can look at it from any different type of lens. It's not going to be a big, slogan type solution that's going to fix these problems. However, I do think that we have to look at a different approach. I mean, even David Eby, the NDP leader here, announced last week the expansion of involuntary confinement for those that have a hardcore addiction. And we've got catch and release programs where people are creating lots of crime in the community, trying to feed their addiction behavior, and it's small businesses that are paying the price for this. Police forces don't have the resources to deal with this, and it just becomes this revolving door of despair. And nobody's actually talking about real solutions. I do think Alberta's seen fentanyl and overdose deaths actually go down to pre-pandemic levels. No other province has had successes like that. So I think, you need to look at where there's been some marked improvement, and the Alberta approach seems to be working.
Brian,
we're going to take a break, Mark, and come back with Marc Kealey and Sara MacIntyre talking about where we are in politics in Canada in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got my political panel with Marc Kealey, a Liberal, and Sara MacIntyre, a Conservative, on the show tonight to talk a little bit about where we are. And, Sara, you had said that Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, just wanted to continue things until February so he could get his pension. I was surprised when the leader of the Bloc came out so quickly this week and said he would support the Liberals and not vote in favor of the non-confidence vote. Sara, how long do you think this government is going to last?
As long as Justin Trudeau can keep his caucus in line. That's it. That's the end of the discussion. As long as his members are voting according to the whip, then that's as long as they're going to stay in. There's obviously, I think, as we mentioned at the beginning, no backbone amongst any of the caucus members or cabinet, frankly, to actually stand up to Justin Trudeau and say, look, no, we need a new leader. We should trigger a leadership review right now. That window is increasingly closing as time comes, as we get closer to the fixed election date. And so I think you'll see, an oscillating kind of level of support between the Bloc and the NDP, depending on what the money bill is dealing with to keep him up. As long as he stays in, it's good for Pierre. More people are getting dissatisfied, turned off, want change. Like, the change level is palpable, at least here in British Columbia. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but I looked at fundraising numbers. I'm like, who's actually giving money to this party? Like, who's writing a check for the Liberal Party of Canada today? Beyond staff members and people that are, livelihoods depend on them staying in power, I have not talked to a single person that wants to see another day of Justin Trudeau in government.
How long is this going to last?
If you're asking me that question, I think we're going to probably see an election in October of 2025. And let me give you this as a perspective.
October of 2025.
Yes, and I just think this is going to go that long. And I think if you listen to Blanchette, the leader of the Bloc Québécois, he's been very clear. Look, we got a lot of things we got to do. We got a lot of things we need to debate in this House of Commons. I don't like this idea about the leader of the opposition saying that this is only being held up by Jagmeet Singh and the NDP because he wants his pension. That's really trite commentary, and I don't think that really serves anybody any good purpose. I will just say,
what do you think motivation is, Mark? Sorry to interrupt you. So what do you think Jagmeet Singh's motivation is? He's clearly saying that the Canadian public doesn't want Justin Trudeau. That's why he ended the agreement.
Yes.
And, his polling numbers are certainly low, so it's not a good time for his party to go. Why is he supporting Justin Trudeau?
I'm in agreement, Sara, from that perspective, except I'll say this. If you look at it on the surface, I just think it's ridiculous for the leader of the opposition to come in the first day of Parliament when it resumes and say, I'm calling a non-confidence motion. For what reason? For what reason? Because you won an election, because your polling numbers or the things that you're seeing in the
Nothing's getting done in the country, Mark. Like,
but at the end of the day, there's still an agenda, there's still an order paper.
There's the agenda.
Well, you've seen the order paper, Sarah. You're as much
I
involved in this as much as I am. There are some really interesting things that we still have to do. And in Canada, for goodness sakes, we're very, very well regarded internationally for the way that we can perform well in terms of a regulatory environment. And we're good at that. There's still some things that need to happen from that perspective. We're still not pivoting. We're going bloody minded down the path of a carbon-free economy. And I think this is an important thing for people to understand. We, fair or not fair, and I think this is where some of the things that we should be looking at. Chrystia Freeland, if we said to the current Minister of Finance and the Deputy Prime Minister, fair or not fair, you've lost the messaging ability. And so maybe if he were smart as a Prime Minister to maybe try to jumble things up in a positive way, like you had suggested, Brian, at the outset, maybe he should replace her. Maybe he should replace the sort of the messianic purpose of Minister Guilbeault in terms of environment. That might do a lot to get people's minds sort of changed in terms of how they support this government. The other thing too, and I think this is where, and if they've asked me for my advice, and I've said this publicly too, that there should be more face time for effective ministers and members of parliament from the Liberal caucus. I'll give you this as an example. I know this, and Canadians don't know this, but you, Sarah, and I know this very well. That cabinet is not a place for democracy. It's a unilateral decision-making process on the part of the Prime Minister. So they can bring their issues forward, and they probably do have arguments in cabinet. It doesn't matter if you're Liberal or Conservative, but at the end of the day, when it doesn't come to a vote, the Prime Minister makes the decision, and that's the scourge of power. But in this particular case, if I'm Justin Trudeau and I want to say, how do I fix this? How do I get people to really take advantage of the good government that we have done over the last 10 years that's been sort of lost because of the messaging that we see from a few people? Get effective ministers and members of parliament involved. Sean Fraser's fantastic. Mark Miller's very, very good. Karina Gould is very good. We've got members of parliament like Anna Gainey, Minister Arif Farandi. You've got Bill Blair, who's been very good. James Maloney, who's an effective parliamentary secretary to justice. These are the kinds of people, Rob Oliphant and Ali Assassi, who are great members of parliament, who are really sort of marginalized around the sideline, who could be really shoring up the brand, the Liberal brand, not the Justin Trudeau brand. And
but it seems like the Liberal Party is just the party of Justin Trudeau. We've talked.
Yes, I've said that right from the start. You're absolutely.
And how can any of what you're describing happen as long as?
But Brian, my caution is, and it's not a caution to you, but more to Sarah, is the exact same thing is happening with the Conservative. If it's about Pierre Poilievre, then it's just a blue color of what we're seeing in red right now. And I'm fearful of that. So that's why I think, in a lot of ways, if I'm Jagmeet Singh or if I'm Blanchette, I'd be saying, why would I have an election right now? For what reason?
Well, when you think about Blanchette, if Pierre Poilievre comes and wins a large majority, maybe some people think the largest majority in Canadian history, other than Brian Mulroney, Blanchette's got no power, zero influence on what can go on. Right now, with Jagmeet Singh ending the supply and confidence motion, Blanchette's got a huge amount of influence and power, does he not? Isn't this the strongest position Blanchette's been in since potentially the era of Stéphane Dion and the potential coalition between the Bloc, the NDP, and the Liberal Party?
Sarah, I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, only in Canada would a separatist party be propping up a federal Liberal government. But look, I think that it doesn't matter what you do in terms of shuffling the deck. The Liberals are on the Titanic, and it is the slowest train wreck, to mix analogies here, train wreck anybody's ever seen. It's painful to watch it every single day, and to hear the level of frustration from Canadians that they want to see change, that it's time for change, that Justin Trudeau's time is up. It's clear that the Liberal Party is not interested in what Canadians want. it is very, very clear that Justin Trudeau does not want to listen to Canadians. Otherwise, he takes some messages from his by-election losses, the breakdown of the supply confidence motion. Bringing in Mark Carney isn't going to save anything. It's just such a liberal move to bring in someone like Mark Carney, thinking that they're going to reset things with Canadians. Like, obviously, you haven't been out on the campaign hustings listening to Canadians. And I'll say this, Mark, the nature of first past the post system, of our electoral system in politics in Canada, it's always about the leader. The leader sets the tone. Like, just as you say in cabinet that it's, the prime minister that sets the decision, regardless of what, cabinet ministers might want or suggest. At the end of the day, it resides with the prime minister in his office. And so that's why people want to know what the leader is. And that's why parties have to find the right leader that connects with the right constituency of votes in order to get into power. And so they build everything around the leader. I mean, it arguably could have been said that it started under Chrétien, or even Mulroney, and it's just kind of accelerated and solidified over the years. And the nature of political reporting, like all of these all of these cabinet ministers you said that you listed off a few minutes ago, I bet you 99% of Canadians have never heard those names before or even know who they are. We do because we watch things, but most Canadians don't know who they are, and they don't care. They hold the leader accountable. It is the leader's party, it is the leader's government, and it is the leader that is held accountable.
Sarah, I agree with you today, but you were in Harper's government. And, when I think about Harper's government, there were other cabinet ministers. Flaherty is probably one of the best examples that really had, I thought, power and influence and an independent brand and power base within the Canadian society. Don't you think that it is an extreme today, both within the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party, of concentration around the leader?
I think it's the nature of politics. I mean, it's, maybe we're just, being a bit slow to the take, but, we have Minister Jolie and Mr. Freeland and Mark Miller and Justin Trudeau. I mean, and in the Conservative Party, you've got Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman, you've got some other kind of MPs that are really trying to make a name for themselves, but it's always very difficult when you're not in government, because what you say doesn't really have any consequence. So, building up your front flank is important. You need your attack dog that can be the one that's going to deliver a message that you don't want your leader to say. You need someone that's going to be able to handle difficult files. We had Minister Wright that did a great job in Harper's government. But that also comes with time. Like, it comes with time, and it comes with being, in government and having to navigate difficult files. And in the nature of opposition, you're not going to have that consequence of your actions or what you say. But Justin Trudeau is, as Mark says at the beginning, and it's self-inflicted wounds. He made the party about him, and now he has to bear the consequence of all of that.
And the Liberal Party does as well. Mark, I got to ask you, Sarah spoke about Mark Carney. If you were right and Justin Trudeau actually did make the decision that it was his time, is there anyone that could save the Liberal Party today? You were there when Pierre Trudeau provided John Turner with, some people thought, a poison chalice. Brian Mulroney tried to pass it on to Kim Campbell. Both were very credible people, and could have and should have made great prime ministers if they were given much time in that role, but they weren't. Mark Carney, if you took a look at his resume and compared it to Pierre Poilievre or almost anyone else, and Sarah's going to say the resume doesn't make any sense, but if I was part of a board recruiting committee to hire a CEO of a company, Mark Carney would have it. Goldman Sachs, Bank of Canada, Bank of England, etc. Does he have a chance? Does Chrystia Freeland have a chance? Does any of those people that you mentioned, frankly, I agree with Sarah, 99% of the Canadian public don't know who they are, but does any of those people have a chance to change the fortunes of the Liberal Party?
Let me go back to Sarah's comment, because I think we're in, and she might not agree with me, but I think we're in violent agreement on this issue, and I'll tell you why. The by virtue of the fact that this prime minister, who's the leader of his party and the leader of his caucus, has not done enough to give face time to anybody else other than himself and his staff, is the reason why the people in this country are feeling like they are. Look, this has been like this since Confederation. Sir John A. Macdonald was probably the best at understanding that I got to get people who I appoint to patronage appointments, or people in my caucus and people in my cabinet who are like-minded. There's been a frenetic move here in terms of appointments where you have non or independent thinkers who are saying, I don't have to do what you say, so I'm not like-minded. So now we have a mess as it relates to things like appointments to the Senate or other patronage appointments. That's a problem that we've had to deal with, and that's a direct responsibility of the Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister, and I've said this forever, when you're Prime Minister of the country, when you're leader of your party, you do not have the luxury of despair. So you can't say things like Canada's broken. You can't say things like we've got huge problems that we've got to deal with. Canada isn't performing well. We are performing well in terms of debt to GDP ratio. We do better than most G7 nations. So how could that be bad for us? That there are a number of people, millions, who want to come to this country. Why? Because this is a good place. Sara made a point, and I fundamentally agree with her. This is a very complicated country to run. Why? Because our Constitution has given powers to the provinces and powers to the federal government, the central government. If I was the Prime Minister, much like what Brian Mulroney did when he was Prime Minister, more First Ministers' conferences, more discussions with the provinces and the feds, more collaboration and cooperation. That is a direct result of the personality, I guess, of this Prime Minister. I'll say this too. This is a practical issue. He doesn't take a briefing well. And those are issues that I think are troubling to insiders like Sara and me. But I will say this, and I think you asked the question about Carney. I'm going to say this point. I told the Prime Minister in public before, he should have taken Mark Carney out of the private sector and put him in his cabinet as a non-elected member of his government. That could have happened, and it's happened before. And if that were the case, put him in as his Minister of Finance. He didn't do that, so now the party has taken him on as an economy guru. I need to say this, and I think it's probably worthwhile for your listeners to understand this, Brian, is that he's saying let's double down on on a green economy, a carbon-free economy. And we could be, talk issues like friendshoring and how we bring more green jobs to this country. If we're looking at competing with China, that ship has sailed. China invested 50 years ago, particularly in 2010 when they came out with their new green economy program. They're beating the world in terms of green. Hydrogen cars, EVs, battery technology, all that's already been done in China. So why are we saying that we could compete with a country with 1.4 billion people, tons of innovation, who've already put this, and it's been in place for over 10 years? These are the kinds of things that almost bother those people who are au fait on this, thinking this is just performative in a lot of ways. I think, I'm going to say this, if we acknowledge errors as a party, acknowledge errors, and we don't double down anymore, and we look at more focus on solutions, I think Canadians will cut us a ton of slack.
Okay, so let me ask my question again. If it's not Marc Carney and it's not Marc Kealey and it's not Justin Trudeau, is there anyone that could save the Liberal Party today?
Well, I think there's no succession plan, Brian. Well, you've got some pretty decent members of that caucus whom I think could, if they thought that they could do this, they could step up. I'm not going to name a name because Dominic LeBlanc came up and he's a valuable part of this caucus. He's a good member of this cabinet. He's smart politically. He's bilingual. He's from neither of Ontario or Quebec, where everybody seems to come from, who wants to be a Liberal Prime Minister. I think he could do well, and he's got a bit of a pedigree. There are others. I'm not certain that right now that person exists. I think that this, like I mentioned those names earlier on, some folks have done a pretty decent job. Maybe, if you look at what Pablo Rodriguez is doing, as Sara said, going to the province of Quebec, and perhaps once he becomes the leader of the Liberal Party, might be premier. Maybe that person exists in the provinces that could come forward to be a leader of this party federally, but no machinery exists right now in a succession plan to replace this guy. But he's got to see the writing on the wall.
Sara, is there anyone that the Conservatives are worried about?
No, no. I mean, I think they would welcome a Marc Carney Pierre Poilievre kind of matchup. I'd like to see Marc Carney actually door knocking. Like, what does he have in common with the average Canadian? I mean, that I would pay to actually see Marc go out and knock on some doors here in Kelowna. A, no one would know who he is, and B, no one would understand him because of his sophisticate talk. But and he has no idea what the average life is like for Canadians. We've seen credit card debt racking up like never before. People, food bank use is going up like never before. People can barely afford to put gas in their car. Sit down and talk with Marc Carney. He's going to fix it for you.
Well, you're right. You're right too, Sara, because to be in this business, you got to be able to door knock, like you said. You got to go to church basements. You got to go to rubber chicken dinners, and I'm not certain that he's of that ilk to do that.
I don't think in today's leader-oriented national campaign you've got to knock on many doors, but you do have to go to a couple of church basements and lots of rallies. There's no question.
You got to have FaceTime with people, even if you're at a rally.
Yeah, you got to have FaceTime.
People actually have to want to come and see you and hear what you have to say. I don't know anyone outside of the Economic Club in Toronto that would pay to see Marc Carney speak.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that, but we might get a chance to see. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in 2 minutes with Sara MacIntyre and Marc Kealey talking about where we are in politics today in Canada. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Sara, I spoke with a gentleman yesterday who's written a book about Justin Trudeau, and he said that things are going to change after the November election in the United States. He said with Donald Trump as the likely president in the United States, Pierre Poilievre looked like a more moderate, more reasonable leader, prime minister versus Donald Trump. But he said that after a Kamala Harris victory, Pierre Poilievre will look very different, will look old school, will look 10 years ago, will look like a Donald Trump Jr., and the Canadians are going to be looking for a Canadian version of Kamala Harris. Does that argument hold any water?
No, I don't think the culture of American politics really pervades that deeply into Canadian choices at the ballot box, to be honest. I think that a lot of people are, conflating what has gone on in the Republican Party in the U.S. with perhaps the catapult of support for Pierre, and I don't think that that's actually analogous. Donald Trump took over that party, changed that party, and he was never a Republican of the traditional sense. On the other hand, Pierre's very different. He's been worked inside of the party. He's been part of the party's creation. He's been in cabinet. He is a lifelong politician. He loves this country. I just don't see the analogies. And I don't think Canadians look at their politicians through the lens of American glasses.
And when Barack Obama won in the United States, I think a lot of people look more favorably on someone like Justin Trudeau. So I disagree with Sara in that regard. I think that that a lot of Canadians do take a look at what's going on in the United States. Do you think a Kamala Harris victory with more left-wing, more progressive values and attitudes would change people's attitudes toward Justin Trudeau and or the Liberal Party and or Pierre Poilievre?
Brian, in Canada, for example, I think we're more intuitively and intrinsically linked to what's happening to our neighbors in the South. Everybody says, we're not like Americans, but we really know a lot about them. We see and feel a lot of what happens there. It doesn't matter if it's on issues like tariffs, it's on issues of trade, it's on issues of sports and business. They're our largest trading partner. We know and love Americans intuitively and realistically. One of the issues, though, that I think is because, and I think I take your point and I agree with your point. It depends on what happens in the United States and why they spent a heck of a long time at a cabinet retreat this summer to talk about what would happen if Trump wins. What will happen if Kamala Harris wins in the United States? Those are really important issues for us. We also have to take into account that right now, Canada, the United States, and Mexico are fundamentally linked in terms of things like trade, movement of people, movement of goods and services, et cetera, and business. And in a lot of ways, I think what happens in the United States directly impacts what happens here. So if Trump wins, and I think Canadians are fundamentally opposed to a Donald Trump government. I don't care what anybody says. There aren't a lot of people that would say that Trump is really something that Canadians would glob onto. Then I think that they'll be tired of that shtick. And I think if this, you see the sloganism that we're seeing out of the current leader of the opposition in Canada, that sloganism, that crime's up, time's up, that's the kind of stuff that smacks of a Trump government in the United States. And I don't think Canadians will like that. I think too, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here, right now the United States, the election there is probably maybe reliant on maybe 3 states. Everybody says it's 5, it's probably 3 states. So I know it's going to be tight because of the way that their system works. But I think we might see Kamala Harris because hope prevails. And if Kamala Harris wins, you're right. I think that it would be very, very tiresome to have a person who's constantly talking about how broken this country is. There are huge issues that have to be dealt with here. And if I could give, just to shift the topic a little bit, if I could give some advice to the current government, said you better concentrate more on bilateral trade between Canada and Mexico, on better relationships right now between Canada and the United States. Those are the kinds of things in Fortress North America that we ought to be talking about. And at home, let's have better interprovincial discussions with first ministers and the government.
So this difference between Trump and the Republican Party that's all been very negative about what's going on in the country versus Kamala Harris in a far more positive, maybe sunny ways, almost a kind of attitude, hope attitude. Is that a lesson for Canada? Because Pierre Poilievre has been very negative about what's going on in Canada. Does that play, or does that hope and joy and confidence resonate better with people?
Well, I mean, I think people like to to feel like that there's something positive and there's some momentum and something to look forward to, and that there's change on the horizon. And there's a bunch of ways to package that. And there's also, a recognition and a validation that people are frustrated. And I think that people feel like their voice is not heard in Ottawa, that nobody is listening to how hard life is right now, that there isn't the next generation is going to do better than the current generation, that hope, that dream is dead. And that is very real for people. And for everyone to say, no, it's all better in Canada. It's fine in Canada. Inflation's 2%. Yay. No, that doesn't change people's pocketbook daily lives and the frustrations that they're feeling. So you may say it's negative, but I actually say it's reflective and it's validating how people are feeling. They feel like the government doesn't understand how hard life is in Canada right now.
Marc, I think this is one of the biggest criticisms of Justin Trudeau, that he doesn't listen. And we talked about this in regards to the trucker convoy, where 15% of the Canadian population actually supported the trucker convoy, and the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, refused to meet with them and listen to them. Is that part of the problem, is that we're just not listening to people?
Of course it is. And that's the solution in and of itself. I made the point earlier on that why don't we acknowledge, why doesn't the government acknowledge that, look, we've made some errors. We haven't listened, or I haven't listened. I can't stand when politicians say, I hear you, and then there's this quiet but. I don't really care. That's what I hear when they say I hear you, but then never really do anything about it. We need to double down on solutions. We need to double down on making sure that people's concerns are heard. Look, I think when you look at how do we solve the housing crisis, We need to be looking at municipalities. We need to be looking at provinces and all this kind of thing. And we have a really marked and fundamental difference between how municipalities, provinces, and the feds work. So you can't necessarily say, I'm going to fix the emergency room crisis in the government of Canada. That's not their purview. We can't be doing things where we're messing in areas where we don't have jurisdiction, and they're getting blamed for everything, like floods, like traffic jams. And I think we need to really dig deep about Canadians and think, you know what, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh. But go back to my point. It all boils down to, is the leader listening? Is he or she, are they effective in their empathy towards Canadians' concerns? I don't think we see that right now. And that's playing out really, really well in the way that people are talking and feeling. The trucker convoy being one of them. If somebody had said, I hear you, I don't necessarily know that you have to agree with them taking over the whole downtown in Ottawa, across from the Parliament buildings for months and months and months, and think that that's valuable or effective. No. But at the end of the day, I think things that need to be looked at, like Arctic sovereignty, like making sure that we have good forestry management, making sure that natural resource regulation are in place, that we're looking at lowering greenhouse gas emissions, that we're making it easy for business to be successful, creating more jobs. Those are the kinds of things that are constantly on the mind of the government right now, and they're just not getting out, because all we're hearing and seeing is the arrogance of a current leader of the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister of this country. That has to change.
Final question, Mark. You said that you predict the election's not going to happen until October of 2025. Is Justin Trudeau going to be on the ballot?
That's a great question. And I will say this, and if you wanted me to put on my faith popcorn hat and be a prognosticator, I'd say he's probably maybe around January, February, going to take his proverbial walk in the snow.
Sara, when's the next election going to be? And is Justin Trudeau going to be running for Prime Minister?
I think on all accounts, it's probably going to be the spring of 2025. This Parliament can only limp along for so long, and there will be some changes in Jud Meatson's pension eligibility that will change the calculus. I think I absolutely think that, Mark. And the question should be why do people stay in politics, not why people go into politics. But I think Justin's going to be on the ballot, and I think it's going to be an absolute rout, and I can't wait.
That's his right to be on the ballot, and if he the fortunes of the Liberal Party suffer because of that, then he has to live with that too, Sara.
Oh, absolutely.
But if they were asking me for my advice, I'd say do your walk in the snow, February. Have a leadership contest, have a delegated convention. There's a ton of attention that comes with that, and some very interesting candidates might show up. And then guess what? They've got 4 or 5 months to show their brains off and get ready for an election on the preferred election date.
Yeah, I mean, the test is going to be when they bring in a budget. Like, how is it going to get passed? Who's going to be supporting it? Like, this is all the political maneuvering that watchers like us like to
Exactly.
It's going to be a fun year, and hopefully the two of you will join me back again so we can talk about this fun year as it goes. I got to take the last couple of minutes and thank the two of you and thank everyone listening, because tonight's show is the 5th anniversary of my time as a radio host on Saga 960. I was recruited to join Saga 960 in the fall of 2019 during the federal campaign. It's hard to believe, but that was the election at the time, and it was quite enjoyable feat. And the two of you have been kind enough to join me a few times over the course of the last 5 years, and it's been 5 years, almost 3,000 interviews of some fascinating people across Canadian and international society. And so I want to thank you, and I want to thank all the listeners for putting up with me and my points of view here and then. That's our show for tonight. Thank you both for joining me. Thank everyone for joining me. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Kelowna, BC, at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videocasts are put up on social media and podcast servers, including YouTube, as soon as the show goes to air. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Mark, Sarah, really, it's always a pleasure chatting with the two of you. Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Mark.